And I see some of the conversation in the chat. We're gonna come to it soon as let's let our last presenter, speak and drop the mic. Similarly, what I want to say is before I pass it, not only do you have black folk being, killed in mass, dozens and dozens, but then you have other efforts. So that's the outright violent efforts, but you have other efforts like a poll tax or a literacy test, or I mean, you even if you want to go back, Baba Chitimukulu called Fannie Lou Hamer's name. If you see the lengths that they went to silence Fannie Lou Hamer from talking about black power around voting, then you will learn the extent and the things that they will go to, the lengths that they will go to keep us from voting. And so this point on voting, I think, is a very important point, and not just to talk globally and not just to talk about when it's the presidential, we also need to talk about it in local cases. And so to that point, I want to bring up Baba Mudada to share some of the importance around, thinking about politics is local as well as international. Go ahead, Baba Mudana.
Peace, peace. I just want to say before I say anything, I count it as a privilege and an honor to be sharing the um, the panel with the brothers that we have this evening. I'm literally at a loss of words. So this is definitely a powerful opportunity for me. I can remember reading Baba Asante's book while I was in African American Studies department at Georgia State as an undergrad. And a lot of that stuff is what really got me going in the direction that I ended up being in, which is currently educating our Black children, working to teach self-defense, so on and so forth. So that said, man, I'm blessed and I appreciate this opportunity. Um, can y'all see what I've shared on the screen?
Yes,
If y'all can
sir.
see it, we
Yep.
can hear y'all say Zalut. I can just unmute, say Zalut.
Yes,
Salute.
sir.
Awesome.
Salute.
Awesome, awesome. Zalut, y'all. So what I got in front of you, I thought it's important to have this conversation with something in front. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to show something, but since we've been talking, I really was like, I want to bring this home by showing this information. My perspective is a little bit different from some of the other brothers that have spoken. Admittedly, and I do want to say, for one, I'm not a Trump supporter, so y'all can stop holding your breath. I'm not a Trump supporter. But also, too, I'm coming from a perspective that deals with Black political thought in a spectrum. I say it like that because I don't think there's one Black political agenda. I think oftentimes saying that um, doesn't value the voices of the Black people who don't go with the mass idea of what it means to be Black, and often we alienate our brothers and sisters in doing that. My perspective looks at the whole spectrum, starting with assimilation, then you got integrationists, you have cultural nationalists, you have cultural Black separatists, you have revolutionary nationalists, and you have Pan-Africanists. And that spectrum essentially lines up who we are as Black people because we're too non-monolithic. We're not one group of people. And that said, oftentimes we have our reasons for voting for why we vote. And it's important that we just garner the things that are important to us. I think that one of the most important things that are to us, to our community, is money, of course, economics, as well as education. It's important to note that the purse is held by Congress, not the president. So even when a president says they're going to do this economically, they're going to do that economically, if they don't have a Congress, it won't happen. And I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. It really does matter just as much, if not more so, who was in Congress in our state, just as much as it does the president. Because as we saw with Obama's second term, well, I can't remember what his first or second. It wasn't much he can do because Congress is, it was a little bit leaning toward Republican enough so that he couldn't really just say, we're going to just do this and it happened. You see what I'm saying? That makes a difference. Also, too, I think a lot of the frustration that comes from the younger generation when it comes to voting is a lot of people see the system for what it is, and they're not necessarily just going to go with the public sentiment. Although I do agree that a lot of the white supremacist fervor has increased with Donald Trump's uh, presidency ascension, I don't necessarily think that Kamala Harris offers a different perspective other than the face of it. It's similar to me when it comes to Obama. I actually voted for Obama in '08 because I saw Obama as a cultural nationalist, and I wanted to vote for the black man. And while he was in office, I didn't personally see a lot for black people being made by him. In fact, he actually dropped bombs in Libya. So for me, it kind of turned me off from thinking from I guess a left wing perspective, not to go to the right wing, but to more so study out the nationalist perspective, so I can really ground myself as to why I feel the way I feel, and I felt I found that. So what I have in front of us here is the ballot for Clayton County, and I've asked people for the past few weeks while we've been early voting, have y'all seen the ballot? Every time somebody has a conversation with me about Trump or Kamala Harris, one way or the other, I never really say anything positive or negative about either presidential candidate. I just lean the conversation toward, have you seen the ballot? Reason why I say that is because my perspective as a black nationalist, I'm looking at this ballot. What's important to me is the money in my community and the education in my community. So that means I need to be finding out who's going to be intimately intertwined and involved in that. Look at what they've done in the past and see if it's something I want to continue or if we need different leadership. As you can see where it says for president of the United States, we got more choices than just the two candidates. We actually have a black man on the ballot for president. I'm not sure how many people knew that, and I don't know why the blackest of us in our community haven't been pushing that. And I think the sentiment that I've often heard is, well, we need to choose one or the other because that's who's in power, and we're going to get the best we can get from one or the other, which may or may not be true, but we'll never know if we don't try another alternative. It was mentioned that we're the largest base for the left wing, for the Democratic Party. If in fact we are the largest base, and we all know that we are the most influential people on the planet, being black people in America, I think it would be of note to possibly consider some other things to do when it comes to presidential election. And we can only do that if we stay informed. So that's why I put this in front of us today, just to look at the litany of candidates that we have on here. But to move past that, because I don't want to belabor that point, I think my brothers did a really good job on discussing the presidential piece. So I'm going to move to the more local piece. If you look at some of the district elections, some of them are contested, like District 5 and District 13. In particular, David Scott is a notable one. I think we should keep an eye on that one. So for all of y'all who are going to vote tomorrow, if you haven't voted already, excuse me, and you really value the power that Kamala Harris can have in the state of Georgia, it's in your best interest to reelect David Scott. That's just something to note. But let's move forward. If you look at Senate District 7, they're running unopposed. 34, they're running with, I'm not too familiar with those candidates. I'd say you want to do some research on them because I don't think either one of are the incumbents. So you want to find out what's going on with them. District 44, unopposed. District 74, unopposed. District 75, unopposed. These are unopposed positions. What this means is no one has stepped up to say what's going on in Georgia now needs to change. We've spoken about nationally and what's going on nationally and the issues that we're having. But in the state of Georgia, there's a lot more power that you have with your vote. Your vote means a lot more to you in your day-to-day and throughout your day-to-day than the national vote does. Because when the president makes a decision of what they want to do, they got to go through Congress, and then the judicial branch is going to look it over to make sure it's constitutional. District 79, unopposed. Judicial Court, District Attorney Clayton County Judicial Court, unopposed, probate judge, unopposed. So what we're saying is the way the criminal justice system in Clayton County right now is going is just fine. Anybody who lives in Clayton County knows that's not the truth. However, these positions are unopposed, which means that nobody has stepped up to make a difference in these particular areas. And this is where organizing politically as Black people comes into play. When we have these ideas about our issues in these different communities where we're not being fairly served, we have to go to what's in our agency, what we have the power to change, and these unopposed positions and are kind of speaking to some of that. The sheriff, unopposed. Tax commissioner, unopposed. Who can raise their hand and say they had an increase in their property tax? If you had an increase in your property tax over the past 4 years, raise your hand. Tax commissioner directly affects that in the state of Georgia, if you're in the state of Georgia. Chief magistrate, unopposed. Solicitor general, unopposed. Commissioner chair, unopposed. And I'm only making this point because it needs to be made. Like, we talk about, okay, the president, but these are important elections that nobody's talking about. And nobody probably even sees these people until they go into the booth to vote. But this is what shocked me the most. County Board of Education, District 6, unopposed. County Board of Education, District 7, unopposed. I don't know who else lives in Clayton County. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Clayton County, but the educational system out in Clayton County here is crazy. Like, it's crazy to think about. It's a few years, maybe less than a decade ago, they got their ability to certify diplomas back. Like, Clayton County's where they are educationally is very low and very bad. But what we're saying with this is that it's okay, keep going, you're doing a great job. Because nobody has stood up to oppose this. And this comes from us organizing as Black people. Now, let me point this out to you though. The people who are running unopposed are Democrat. What that means is people who are gonna vote down the line for the Democratic candidate and don't know any better because they call themselves Democrats, they're gonna vote for these people and they're gonna put them back in office. And we're gonna have the same complaints for the next 4 years about where our educational program is in Clayton County. We're gonna have the same complaints for the next 4 years about what's going on in terms of the money flowing in the state of Georgia the way it needs to flow. And then we got some propositions here, some proposed constitutional amendments. The first one is provides for a general law statewide homestead exemption that may differentiate among political subdivisions. Who understood what that statement says? Raise your hand. Okay. The explanation down here, shall the Constitution of Georgia, I'm gonna read the whole thing, I'll let you read it. But the point is, this is the type of stuff that we need political education in our communities for. We need to have meetings in our communities that we organize with people who are political scientists, who are political experts, sitting down with our community members and breaking down each one of these proposals so that when they go in here to make their vote, they're not just arbitrarily voting for something. Because we all know that stuff happens when elections like this, where we won't be paying attention, and in the cloak of the shadow of the night, there's some new laws. I'm like, where does law come from? And in reality, we actually voted for it. So this is important to keep in mind when it comes to local elections. And I'll make the point really quickly. I wanted to reemphasize that I am not a Trump supporter, nor am I a Kamala Harris supporter, because I don't support political parties in America. I think that if you are an integrationist or an assimilationist and you support political parties in America, that's just fine. And me as a Black nationalist, I will support you. I will line up to get all the comrades that I know who also maybe agree with me to provide protection for you, self-defense for you, self-defense classes if you need it. We will aid you in political education. But I think that what needs to happen also is we need to have a strong conversation and a real conversation about what it means to be Black in America. Do we really want to align ourselves with a group of people who have not really shown themselves to be, they've spoken differently than the other side, but they haven't really shown improve for us. And even we mentioned Malcolm X. Malcolm X says the white liberal is the biggest enemy to the black community. And the reason why they're the biggest enemy to the black community is because they can speak to the the buzzwords that we hold dear: equality, education, economics, black boys, black women. Like they can speak to those things, and they'll tell us what they know the words to tell us that we need to hear in order to know that in order to for us to think that they're not racist. I don't believe that if somebody tells you that they're not racist, doesn't mean they're not racist. I think you have to look into the past of who they are. And Joe Biden himself, when they were having the presidential debate in 2020 for the Democratic nominee, pointed out a lot of things about Kamala Harris that people have forgotten about. I also don't think that it's insignificant that, and I'm only saying this because we're on the topic. We have a presidential candidate that's a black man, and nobody's talking about it. But we're having this debate about whether or not Kamala Harris is black. Now, I won't go into that debate because I don't want to offend anybody on this panel. I think that it's important for us to focus on the facts and focus on why we're here, which is whether or not we should vote. Clearly, the answer is yes. But in my opinion, we need to pay more attention to the local election and also pay more attention to finding out what it means to utilize Black power, because Black power isn't just voting. Black power is using our vote to gain power. We all the other communities that we've mentioned who align themselves with the left wing can actually go and say that we fundamentally align ourselves with them because we've gained A, B, and C. Whereas we're aligning ourselves with the left wing because we're anti-racist. You see what I'm saying? Like we're aligning ourselves with them because we're against the enemy, as opposed to maybe circling our wagons and finding out a way to be our own best ally. But that's just another maybe uh, us Negroes who join Black Brotherhoods. We have these dreams of Black a nation, and I do think that that's a possible thing. But now, when we live in this society, we do have to use our vote um, with more utility. And I think the best way for us to do that is to begin to focus more on on the local election. And I'll show one more thing real quick to get off. If y'all want to get an idea of where those districts are located, there's a good map here. And this will tell you who actually is in office in different areas. So you know who we're talking about in terms of the uh, governors elections. You know which county is what, because all of this stuff is important. If you don't understand where you are in the world, you're really just kind of going with the flow. And as important as I think this election is to figure out which president is going to best move America forward, honestly, it's just as important, if not more important, for us to focus on who's going to move our communities forward. And I'll leave it there.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Oh, thank you so much, Baba Mudada, for bringing the important point around being aware of what's happening in our local, and our local affairs,